How are you? How are you? How are you? Yes, there are videos happening. Oh my gosh, I have notes because I had a little burst. Here comes Bella. She likes to sit with me when I'm in this chair. This is a chair and a half, so we both sit together. So, I got a little burst of inspiration to talk about something today. Yes, my Raven Peck bruise is still there, and I'm calling it that lovingly because that's the name that Arwen has given it from afar, whether she knows it or not. She's like, hello, hello. Yes, yes, I get it. So I was in Witchiversity today, and there were some folks. No, we're not going to do this while I'm making videos. Just a moment. You go find another toy that is soft and not noisy. Go on. Um, we were in Witchiversity today, and I had made a comment that it probably was a good time of year to talk about ancestry work and shadow work too, because it is Halloween, Samhain. The veil is very thin. This is the time of year when people tend to, if they're at all, inclined to do so, this is the time of year when people tend to start thinking about things like that. Although this kind of work happens all year. I mean, we all know that, but yeah, that's an orchid light back there in case anybody's wondering what that purple glow is. I have an orchid growing and they like special lights. And all that noise is Bella, who I'm telling you, every time I make a video, she's like, I'm going to stress eat or stress chew or stress tear up paper. Like if all of my attention is not on her, she like does things. So does that sound familiar, Gracie? Yeah. Um, she's my beloved though, so I'm sorry about the noise. But so ancestor work, ancestry work, and I'm doing it. I'm doing shadow work in with this because here's the thing: they kind of go together for me. And all of what I'm about to say is my opinion. It's how I do things. Your mileage may vary. Figure out what works for you, etc., etc., etc. Because the last thing I want to do is make anyone think that there is a specified way that you must do these things. There's not. It's figure it out for yourself. So, what is ancestry work? Well, for me, I define ancestry work, and when I'm talking today, I'm going to talk specifically about what I particularly do around this time of year. Ancestry work happens throughout the year. This time of year tends to be what inspires me to do certain types of work. So, ancestry work, what is it? Well, I tend to think of it as a form of shadow work that does not necessarily include digging through the dark aspects of your ancestors because, ancestry work really it is about the type of shadow work where you pick things apart, you put it under a microscope, you get in home with it, she is never going to stop eating. You, you really dive into it and put more energy into it than you normally do. You tease it apart in different ways. You do different types of ritual around it. Kind of like with the Christian Christmas, where you may give people that you care about presents. Well, you can do that all year. It just doesn't have the same type of connotation as when you do it at Christmas time. So that's kind of what I'm talking about here. Ancestry work can involve shadow work, and for me, it often does, and it's because of the history of my family. And I'll get more into that in just a minute. I'm probably going to sneeze in just a second because this particular incense is really loud. I love it, but oh my lord. Excuse me. I'm not editing that because I'm lazy. So, what is ancestry work? Well, it can look like very tangible things like going through photos of your family, pulling out trinkets or jewelry that once belonged to your grandmother. Uh, it can look like doing genealogical research. It can look like visiting the resting place, aka the graveyard of your actual family. It can be looking at videos of people who are no longer here. Um, it can be a lot of different, very tangible things that you can physically do. The undercurrent of that is that you're reconnecting with your ancestors in a really specific way. You are going back to the root of who you are with their help. You are studying the places that you come from. You are looking at the bones of the family structure that make you who you are. And it's not all about you. It is about honoring the actual people who have passed on in your life. And you can do ancestry work with people that are still here. If you have someone in your life where you want to honor what they've brought to your life and you feel that that's part of ancestral work, that's fine. They don't need to be passed on. They don't need to be on the other side of the veil. You can do the work here. In my opinion, it's actually not disrespectful. For instance, I'm going to visit my grandfather tomorrow night. My grandfather he's in his mid-90s. He's blind, and he is my grandpappy, and I love him with everything I've got. And one of the things that I've been doing lately is when I visit him, I will get him to retell stories to me. And I actually record them with my iPhone so that I can have a record of his voice because, he's 96 and he's been on this earth a long time. I don't know how much longer he'll be here. I mean, he's pretty spry, don't get me wrong. He's pretty healthy. But, those are very tangible things. Things that are in the undercurrent sometimes are different. So that may involve things like, if you do look at photos of your ancestors or do genealogy work, or watch videos, that may spur memories for you. So something else that you can do that's kind of an undercurrent is pull those things out of your psyche about your ancestors. For instance, I still remember, I was lucky enough to remember both of my great-grandmothers. And, I'm lucky, I know that, because I know a lot of people that don't even know they've never even known their grandmother. Their grandmother was passed on by the time they were born. I had 2 great-grandmothers in my life and a bunch of great-aunts and great-uncles. So one of the things I do for ancestry work is I've actually gone back and written down every memory I have of them. Sometimes it's very small things, like one of my great-grandmothers had a spittoon. She dipped the old school snuff that was like, the dust. She dipped snuff, and she would sit in her rocking chair. It was a recliner rocker, with this giant brass spittoon next to her, and she would spit in it. And, my people are really down home. I never knew that, I didn't think of it as gross when I was a kid. I just knew that was something that she did. And, one of my jobs when I was 4 and 5 years old was to take it outside and dump it in the bush. And, I remember very distinctly one time there was a cat in the bush, and I remember I dumped the spittoon on top of this cat. It was like a stray cat. And I remember my great-grandmother roared with laughter. She had an incredible sense of humor, and she was so much fun. And she was very irreverent. She cursed like a sailor. She was a fun lady. And she didn't put up with anybody's mess. So I've actually written things like that down because you think that you will always remember those things. That is not true. Everybody's memory fades. And the reason I know that for me is because I have actually had things bubble up to the surface for me in recent years that I had completely forgotten about. So write those things down that you remember. Sometimes it's having part of ancestry work could also be maybe you've got a bunch of old family photos that are damaged, and maybe you take them and have them repaired at one of those photo repair services. Maybe you've got a ring from your grandmother that you would like to wear, and all these years you've meant to go get it sized. Now's the time. Maybe you've got a quilt that you've had in a box up in the attic from your grandmother that you've never put on the bed because you want to save it. Well, now maybe it's time to figure out how to get that down and get it displayed somewhere. These are very simple things, but it's a way to just invite the energy of your ancestors back into your life and bring you back to your roots of who you are. Now, that does include, for some of us it includes ritual. Many of us keep an altar to our ancestors in our home. I had a video of mine up. I don't know. I don't think I still have it up. I'll re-release it one of these days. But, and the one that I have in there, I can't show you right now. But, you know, if you want to make an altar to your ancestors, put things that represent them. My great-grandmother was a huge fan. She loved roses of all kinds. And when I see roses, I generally do think of her. So there are lots of roses all over her altar. I have her 50th wedding anniversary teacup and saucer. You know, things that are just representative, and it's a way to just keep that energy displayed and fed and present in your life. Figure out what works for you. Maybe an altar is not the way you want to go. Maybe you just want to make a photo album. Maybe you have gone on the internet and researched on some of these genealogy sites. And I'm going to tell you another thing to do is get on 23andMe and have your DNA done. I had mine done. I was shocked. I was shocked. I will make a whole separate video about that. I think that I have a coupon code for 23andMe, and if I do, I will put it down in the down bar. I'm almost positive I do. 23andMe is basically where they take your spit and they analyze it, and they can tell you your heritage. They can tell you a lot about yourself, actually. Some people are not a fan of it because they don't want their DNA in a registry. That's up for you to decide. I wanted it because I had a lot of conflicting stories from both sides of my family about what my actual heritage is. And I was actually kind of shocked because I have a whole lot more Irish heritage than I realized. And by a whole lot more, I mean I'm like 70% Irish, which explains my proclivities for certain goddesses. I also have 0% of a certain heritage that I have been told my entire life, oh, our family is so-and-so. I'll make a separate video. I'm just saying, if you've ever been considering it, do it. It's very enlightening. And it does help put you in touch with your roots. If you don't know where you come from, if you're not sure of the stories, if you just want to verify the stories, because, you know, everybody's got a magic story in their family. I know so many, especially white people. I know so many white people that are like, well, my great-grandmother was a medicine woman. Or, you know, my great-grandmother was a Cherokee princess. Like, you know, I know it's not just white people, but I know a lot of white people personally that like to have all these magic stories about how, you know, they've always got magical people in their family. And look, everybody's grandma cannot be magic medicine women, okay? I know everybody wants to have a special story, but sometimes that's just BS. So do your DNA if you at all question the stories you've been told, because people's memories, they fade. And sometimes people just want to have something other than, yeah, we're from Europe in their DNA. So consider that. I have notes here, so. There's also, I think, DNA.com. There's several services. 23andMe is not the only one. You can look for records online of your ancestors. You can find, if you can find, you know, their first and last name, you can find their death certificate most of the time. If you're lucky, you can find their birth certificate. There's lots and lots of genealogy websites you can join where you will be shocked that other people have already done a lot of family work. My uncle has done almost that entire side of the family. I found out that I'm related to a lot of, there's some people that are notorious, notable, they're famous. You know, and I'm not talking about like Madonna famous. I'm talking about there are people whose name you'd recognize. But know that you have a lot of free resources at your fingertips if you have access to the internet. There's an amazing website called findagrave.com where if you are not sure where some of your ancestors are buried, you can go look them up. And there are people that their pastime is going around to graveyards and photographing the headstones and cataloging all of the graves. I had a great aunt that I knew about when she passed away. I just didn't know where she was buried. And I always felt really terrible about not being able to visit her stone. My family they tend to bury people. There's not a lot of cremations in our family. I wish there were more cremations in our family, but I guess it is nice to visit, you know, a gravestone. But you can go on that website, and if you're curious about where your people are, look them up. I will also tell you, if you are a person who enjoys, um, if you enjoy graveyards in general, that particular website is also helpful if you want to know where famous people are buried. You can find out where serial killers have been buried. You can find out a lot. So just be creative. And at every graveyard, you can find graveyard dirt. So I also want to address, um, if you're adopted and you don't know, you know, who your blood parents are, that's okay. You can still do ancestry work. You can do it in a couple of ways. If you're adopted, you can absolutely focus on your adoptive parents as your ancestors. You can absolutely dive into that as your family if that feels right for you. You can also research your birth parents. If you don't know who your birth parents are, that's okay. Go to a service like 23andMe and you can find out at least about your heritage. You can find out what part of the world you come from. And they can tell you, they can tell you about your health. They can tell you if you've got a likelihood for certain things based on your DNA. Um, there are some that will tell you if you have proclivities towards certain types of illnesses. It's very, very helpful. You know, I know that ancestry work can be very painful for people who they're not connected to their ancestors for whatever reason. Either maybe they're adopted, but that can also come with being estranged from your family. Um, this kind of work is difficult if you are not connected to your family, birth family, in the way that you want to be. I know a lot of people, and I myself have some folks in my family who I'm estranged from. I don't have anything to do with them. So doing ancestry work is painful sometimes because it does tend to bring up feelings. It brings up, sometimes it brings up some shadow stuff. So it is a good time to explore that if you're feeling up to it. It's a good time to journal about it. It's a good time to play music and get in touch with it. It's a good time to incorporate that into, if you're a person who does a dumb supper. You have to figure out how doing that work feels best for you. The point is not to do anything that is harmful to yourself mentally, that is, you don't want to do anything that's going to bring you stress. The point of this is to invigorate you, to make you feel more connected to who you are as an individual and to know yourself better. Because, when you know certain things about where you come from, you do feel more connected. Guys, when I found out that I am like such a huge percentage Irish, of course I wanted to study more about Ireland and the Irish people and Celtic lore. Of course. Because that's what comes with going, oh gosh, I'm actually more connected to this than I ever knew. Can you imagine if you thought that your people were from Mexico all this time and you do some research into your genealogy or your ancestry or DNA and you find out that your people are actually from India? Can you imagine like how that would turn your world upside down? So prepare yourself as well. Cleanse yourself and also, protect yourself psychically if you need to. If you feel like there are things, that you want to learn about or things that you may learn about that you're not expecting, because that can be difficult. The other thing I want to offer is if you are not connected to your family in a way that allows you to dive into ancestry work, you're adopted, you're estranged, lots of different reasons. They've all passed away, lots of different reasons. You can create what I call chosen family. And that means that you build a family network out of people that you love and trust that you are not related to. And I'm not talking about just friends. Yeah, they're friends. I'm not talking about just friends. I'm talking about people who, if your partner died in the middle of the night, the people that you would call. I'm talking about the people that if they needed a kidney, you would give them one. I am talking about people who live in your heart in ways that most people in this world don't. And chosen family can be closer to you than blood family ever was, depending on how you build those structures. My family is built out of a lot of chosen family. And I know a lot of gay people that, they have tenuous relationships with their blood family. So I know a lot of gay people who actually, their chosen family is all they've got. I'm lucky. I've got blood family in my life. But you know, there are also people who have, maybe they've been an addict at one point or another in their life, and their blood family doesn't want anything to do with them. And even if they've cleaned their act up and gotten their stuff together, their family's like, yeah, no, you did this thing. We don't forgive you. Sometimes people have to go and build families out of their friends and people that they love for those reasons. So consider building a chosen family. And that can be part of your ancestry work. If you have people in your life and you don't want to do ancestry work in the ways I've described or traditional ways, use this time of year to strengthen the connections to the people that you do consider family. That's part of ancestry work. Strengthen those connections by picking up the phone and calling them if it's been a while. And you know, we've all got that aunt or uncle who lives by themselves because their husband or wife has passed away, and you know, you hate calling them or going by sometimes because they're so lonely they will talk your ear off. But God, please call these people. Please consider visiting with your elders. You know, if you've got people in your life that maybe it's a little bit uncomfortable to be around, I certainly have a couple of people like that in my life, but it is important to nurture those connections. You'll feel better. You'll feel more grounded. You'll feel more centered. Um, you know, think about the framework of ancestry that would feel good to you, and picture that in your head. What does family look like to you? What do you want it to look like? And that's what I think about with ancestry work. What do I want my family unit to look like going forward? So if your relationship with your children has been struggling, maybe go back to your own childhood and look at where you come from so that you can look for ways to break cycles if you need to, or draw upon the good experiences and put those into play if you need to. Think about what it is you desire from your family connection and from your connection to your ancestors. Are there things you've always wondered about? Are there things within you that are unexplained that you feel like may come from a long line of ancestors? Research that. Meditate on it. Write it. And consider that sometimes, no matter how much research we do, sometimes it is still difficult to feel connected to our ancestors in the way that we really crave. My grandmother, who has been gone since 1999, walked on water as far as I'm concerned. And we had a wonderful relationship. She was a very magical woman. But my grandmother was also a human being just like the rest of us, and she had her flaws. And, you know, there were times in my early 20s that I used to kind of go, I wish that thing about her wasn't the way it was. But I've begun to realize that everything about her, even the things that I really couldn't connect with, everything about her was important, and everything about her made her who she was. So part of my own ancestry work over the years has been going back and looking at the people that I've had up on a pedestal and saying, maybe I shouldn't have had them on a pedestal. Maybe I should have just had them in my heart. Does that make sense? If the concept of family is difficult for you. Now, and I'm just going to say this, there are some people who have been through so much trauma that the idea of diving into their ancestry work, they are completely adverse to that. They're like, no, I don't want anything to do. Maybe because of trauma or maybe because of other things. If that is if that's something that's difficult for you, what you can do is do ancestry work with inside yourself. Go inside yourself. Go to your inner self and just work on being your best self. Go to the roots of who you are in your own family tree inside yourself and say, oh, back in my late teens, I used to love horseback riding. And maybe that's something that you would consider getting back to the root of. Or, man, when I was 5 years old, I really loved eating grilled cheese sandwiches with mustard, and I haven't had one in 30 years. We'll go make one. That seems very simple, but it is just about nurturing the parts of yourself that are rooted in history, that are rooted in where you've come from. And also, it's a good time of year, and this is where the shadow work kind of comes into play. It's a good time of year to take stock of maybe the things that are in the ancestry tree of your life. Take stock of the things that are harmful to your psyche, things that don't really work for you, and maybe do some work on letting those things go. There are a lot of people who have wonderful families, and even sometimes in wonderful families, they will have people in their families who have done, said, or just existed in terrible ways. I'm not saying that you need to work toward forgiveness or even acceptance, but if there's something about your roots that is taking up a lot of mental space in ways that you don't want it to, maybe now is the time to start on a path toward figuring out how to shield yourself from that, or how to move forward or go in a different direction with positivity and love. I hope this answers some of the questions that came up today in Witchiversity. You know, I was glad that question came up. What is ancestry work? How do you even do it? Because, you know, I used to hear people talk about shadow work, and I would be like, what is that? Like, how do you do it? And people would always talk in very vague terms. Well, I've been doing some shadow work. Okay, what does that mean? Are you making paper mache models of trains? Are you drinking mustard straight out of the jar? Are you, dancing down the side of the highway? What does it mean? Define it for me in terms that I can understand. Give me a picture, and that's where I appreciate people that are like, shadow work. I'm journaling. I'm meditating on things. I'm trying to figure out how to be a better me, and these are the ways I'm doing that. Ancestry work is the same, and it's probably different for everybody. Some people have very strict ideas of what ancestry work looks like, and some people are like, look, you do what's right. Do what gives you the best feeling about exploring your ancestry, and that's kind of where I come from. I will put a link to some books that I have found about shadow work, but I think that they can specifically help you do some ancestry work. And I will also put a link to 23andMe if I can find it, and a couple of other places that may be helpful to you. As always, I appreciate you watching my video. This one's almost 30 minutes long. I apologize. I have been so wordy lately. And I was going to put this on Witchiversity and just make it for Witchiversity, but let's all do it. Let's all talk about it. As always, you can support me on Patreon if you'd like more videos. I will be doing a drawing for the beautiful grimoire probably tomorrow night after I get home from my grandfather's, or maybe Friday night. It just depends. My schedule's a little crazy right now. I have a lot of exciting things coming up, and I will be sharing those with you here. I appreciate each and every one of you. You guys have been just completely magical, and you have enriched my life in 100 different ways, and I'm so excited to be here and just to be sharing again and to be lit up again in ways that are magic and fun. So I hope this has been helpful. Please feel free to leave your comments down below. Be nice. And until next time, many wonderful blessings to each and every one of you. Bye-bye.